The living room of the Pineda Branis home was bathed in a warm, golden glow as the early light trickled through the large windows. Sitting at the kitchen table with a hot cup of coffee in her hands, Jasmine Pineda stared at her daughter Matilda's small form as she ran about the room with the unbridled energy that only a 6-year-old could have. Her laughter filled every nook and cranny of their house, resonating off the walls like pure, light music. Behind her, Matt Branis walked stealthily while holding a dish of toast. A tiny, gentle smile brushed his lips as he watched Jasmine watch their daughter, and his gaze grew softer. When the outside world vanished and just the warmth of family remained, those were the times that made every hardship worthwhile. Through love, perseverance, and common goals, they had gradually constructed a life together, piece by piece. Matilda was the center of it all. She was their hope, their tie, and their tiny miracle. Matilda seems to have an insatiable curiosity. She inquired about the most basic yet profound topics, such as the stars and the reasons behind birdsong. Her eyes were wide and eager as she proudly showed her parents the pictures she sketched on bits of paper. "Look, Mom. Look, Dad. The sun and moon are together," she would shout, gesturing with her tiny fingers to a crooked yet flawless work of art. In her view, the world was limitless and love was simple. So Jasmine and Matt would exchange glances and giggle softly. Their mornings were joyful and pleasant rituals. They enjoyed breakfast together, teased one another over milk that had been spilt, and quietly felt thankful that they had each other. Matilda would laugh uncontrollably as Matt would ruffle her hair while feigning sternness, while Jasmine would smooth her hair and whisper small secrets that only a mother could know. They believed that their existence was spectacular, even though it was commonplace. But in the quiet between heartbeats, life has a way of changing, almost without being noticed. Little things were the first. The fever lasted longer than normal. Matilda was a little tired, which caused her to move more slowly. There were mornings when her once bright enthusiasm appeared diminished, and nights when she would toss and turn while perspiring beneath the covers. Jasmine made an effort to ignore it, convincing herself that it was only a minor ailment that kids frequently experience. However, she secretly sensed a constriction in her chest, a mother's intuition indicating that something was amiss. They went to doctors in search of clarification and comfort. Experts were consulted and tests were conducted. Every session concluded with professional remarks and kind smiles, but the fear hung over their house like a dark cloud. Then the day finally arrived when the words they had silently feared appeared on paper. Matilda's disease was uncommon, difficult, potentially fatal. Time appeared to pause for a second. Jasmine sensed that her knees were getting weaker. With his own tears moist, Matt held her hand tightly and muttered that they would fight no matter what. Their lives had shrunk to the size of a single room, a single bed, and a single frail heartbeat inside the hospital's walls while the outside world went on, unaware. The weeks that followed were a haze of fluorescent lights, white walls, and the incessant hum of machinery. Matilda's laughing dwindled and was replaced by sighs and drowsy eyes that looked about for her parents. Matt and Jasmine lived each day with the sole intention of supporting her, keeping her safe, and giving her all of their love and hope. Jasmine would sit by Matilda's bedside every night, caressing her hair while muttering prayers and unfulfilled promises. Matt would talk to doctors, plan therapies, and conduct endless research in an effort to cling to a hope that appeared just out of grasp. The house they used to call home now felt both familiar and alien in these quiet moments. Every sound served as a reminder of what they were striving to preserve, and every corner brought back memories of laughing. Sometimes, when Jasmine watched Matilda sleep, she would experience a profound agony that only love could ease, one that was unabated by reason or medication. Despite the uncertainties, they discovered little moments of happiness. In the dark of the hospital room, Matilda would smile a little when her favorite music came on, when Matt made a funny face, or when Jasmine's hand touched hers. These few moments turned into lifelines, delicate strands that held them to hope. Jasmine and Matt held on to each other through it all, knowing that their relationship would be the strength that got them through whatever happened next. Because one thing was certain despite the silence, the darkness, and the long nights spent holding hands and whispering prayers, genuine love never lets go. Nights became days, and days became a never-ending haze of hospital hallways, beeping equipment, and murmured anxieties. Once full of vitality and curiosity, Matilda now moved delicately, her little frame burdened by disease. As though even the air surrounding her was too thick, every breath she took seemed deliberate and cautious. Every shudder, every sigh, every fleeting grin that vanished too soon broke Jasmine and Matt's hearts as they watched helplessly. Their whole universe was the hospital. They were only familiar with the cold floors, the sterile antiseptic odor, and the continuous buzz of equipment. But love was burning brightly than ever inside those walls. Jasmine was always by Matilda's side. She held her shaking hands, bathed her, fed her, and murmured hopeful stories into her ears. By reading fairy stories, singing softly, and reminding her daughter of the adventures they would have together when she was healthier, she made an effort to lighten every moment. Matt also wouldn't leave her. He spoke with doctors, looked for treatments, and begged for more options while balancing hope with the terrible realities. Every conference of specialists was a conflict between faith and reality. Every appointment left him worn out, and when he returned to the room, Matilda was sleeping, holding a small stuffed animal, her little chest rising and falling in sluggish, irregular breaths. There were moments of brittle joy even as they battled. When Matt held her hand or Jasmine traced stars on her arm to reassure her that they were keeping watch over her, Matilda would grin a little. Period appeared to halt during those moments, and they briefly recalled a period before the shadows when they were able to enjoy pancakes, laughter, and sunny mornings. As the sickness tightened its hold, those moments turned into lifelines, strands of hope that kept them together. Hope, however, was a fragile thing. Additional issues were found during tests. The realization that Matilda's body was weak and that her battle against this unseen foe was uncertain deepened with each report. Whispered prayers and quiet tears filled Jasmine's nights. Every doctor's appointment, every statistic, every sobering prognosis made Matt's jaw tighten. But while she was still alive, still laughing, still breathing in the tiny, ephemeral pleasures that held onto life, neither of them let despair pull her away from them. Even the kindest remarks from friends and family were unable to break through the barriers of powerlessness and fear that encircled Jasmine and Matt. Unaware of the heartbreak taking place in the hospital room, the outside world continued on. However, every heartbeat and each breath of Matilda's was a cosmos in and of itself to Jasmine and Matt. The roughest times were at night. Holding Matilda close when alone in the hospital room's sterile glow, Jasmine would gaze at her daughter's fragile face, learning every freckle, curl, and little expression by heart. She would silently swear that she would fight with all of her strength and that she would never give up. Beside her, Matt would grip her hand as their silent tears mixed, and they drew strength from one another, both of them wanting to maintain hope. Their devotion did not waver as the shadow of reality drew nearer. Every tiny chuckle and soft murmur from Matilda turned into a lighthouse. As though their love could drive the gloom away, they clung to these times with ferocity and suffering. However, a terror that they dared not express out loud persisted in the quiet areas of the hospital, behind the monitors and the equipment. There, growing silently, waiting was the shadow of loss. Nevertheless, Jasmine and Matt persevered with every cry, every restless hour, and every feeling of powerlessness. They were the world to Matilda. They were the last light left for each other. They had only love, raw, unrelenting, and uncompromising, and that love would keep them going even as the storm approached. They had no guarantees or certainty. Every morning was a fresh rush of fatigue and silent fear as the days became heavier. Once lively and full of laughter, Matilda's tiny frame had grown weak and pallid, her vitality gradually vanishing like sand between her fingers. Neither Jasmine nor Matt could ignore the dreadful fragility that accompanied every cough, short breath, and fleeting grin. The hospital room had become the size of Jasmine's world. Every tiny glimmer of life, every flicker of vitality that suggested Matilda may still struggle was what she lived and breathed for. Every tear was a silent cry, and every grin was a miracle. Even though her body hurt from not getting enough sleep, she refused to let go of her kid, for even a little time. Every soft touch and whisper was an assurance that she would always be there for them, even when it looked like the world was about to tear them apart. Matt silently bore his own burden of hopelessness. He spent many hours looking for a glimmer of hope when none seemed to exist, conducting incessant research, interviewing physicians, and investigating experimental therapies. However, no amount of preparation or understanding could make him immune to the sense of powerlessness that gripped his heart each time Matilda's tiny body faltered. Kind and professional, the hospital staff flowed around them like faraway shadows, but they could never fully replace a mother's love or a father's unwavering hands. Occasionally, Jasmine would glance at Matt on the other side of the room and see the same worry and tiredness reflected in his eyes, reflecting her own suffering. Together, they bore an unsaid burden, the awareness that their daughter's life was in jeopardy. Matilda nevertheless made an effort to play, to laugh, and to act as though nothing had changed during quiet times. She would ask about the stars she adored so much, or cuddle a shabby plush animal to her chest while muttering little stories she had made up. These were brief but holy moments. As if preserving them for the days they might never have, Jasmine committed every word, breath, and expression to memory. But reality's weight was unrelenting. Test after test turned up fresh issues. Their hope eroded with each report. Their little triumphs, a pleasant day, a tiny smile, a brief period of warmth, felt fleeting in the face of the impending threat of disease. The length of the nights became intolerable. Matilda's pale face was covered in icy shadows from the fluorescent hospital lights, and the steady beep of the monitors served as a reminder of the dangers while also providing solace. Matt and Jasmine resisted giving in to terror in spite of their desperation. They held her hand with an intensity that came from true love, sang softly to her, read her favorite books, and whispered encouraging words. Matilda was unable to see their own weariness and heartache because they kept it to themselves and gave all of their strength to keeping her spirits up. However, the weight of loss was increasing. With every ragged breath, every moment of weakness, it pressed against their hearts as it hung over the room like a silent storm. At times, Jasmine found herself picturing a world without Matilda, a concept that was so painful she could barely breathe. Matt would hold her hand and steady her in silence, saying they would deal with whatever came up. Their love became the only thing that remained constant during those long, quiet nights, even as the hum of machines and the occasional footsteps of nurses filled the air. It was unrelenting, unwavering, and a fragile act of defiance against a world that seemed determined to tear them apart. They lacked confidence, assurances, and solutions. Just one another. Only the brief, brittle moments of Matilda's modest, courageous existence. They held on to hope despite everything, understanding that while love would not be sufficient to save her, it would be sufficient to get them through any heartache that might come their way. In the hospital, time seemed to slow down, and every heartbeat was more audible than before. Matilda was in worse shape. Her tiny body, which had previously been vibrant and alive, now appeared as delicate as porcelain and shook with each breath. Her parents were held responsible for the invisible fight she waged, and her eyes, which were now duller than before, were always looking for them. She wouldn't let Jasmine leave her side. Every hug, tender touch, and hushed phrase served as a lifeline. She kept Matilda close to her, memorizing every little motion and sigh as she felt the quick, shallow breaths against her chest. Her daughter's every look was an appeal, a query, a scream for the fortitude that could only come from love. The truth of her daughter's fragility gnawed Jasmine more and more every hour, despite her best efforts to give it her heart, soul, and very existence. Matt never stopped. Days of study, phone calls, and consultations merged with restless nights. He sought urgent interventions and tried different treatments, but the illness shone a tenacity that no medication appeared to be able to overcome. Holding Matilda's hand, he sat next to her and told her stories about their future travels together after she recovered. Even though he was terrified, every grin she offered him, no matter how small, gave him more motivation to fight. The days turned into a slow, grueling endurance test. The hospital lights created harsh, icy shadows. Nurses worked quietly and machines beeped nonstop. Clinging to the slender thread of life that kept Matilda breathing, Jasmine and Matt lived in a state of transition between hope and despair. There were brief bursts of happiness, these fleeting moments of normalcy, a little giggle, a whisper of her favorite tale, a tiny finger grip around theirs, were both a relief and a source of agony. Each one served as a reminder of Matilda's identity and potential while simultaneously implying that they were in danger of losing her completely. The world outside dwindled as the sickness tightened its hold. Support from friends and family was provided, but it was never enough to alleviate the extent of the pain in the hospital room. Matt and Jasmine were left to endure the insurmountable burden of uncertainty alone. A painful reminder of time slipping through their fingers, each hour seemed to go on forever. But despite the growing darkness of despair, they resisted giving up. To Matilda's ears, they whispered words of courage, love, and support. They prayed for her, held her, and sacrificed themselves to protect her from the storm from which she was unable to flee. Love turned into their comfort, their armor, and their weapon. The night dragged on, harsh and relentless. Every minute of Matilda's battle was punctuated by the menacing rhythm of the machine's continuous beeps. Together, they clung to what seemed like an impossible, flimsy hope as Jasmine traced circles on her daughter's tiny fingers and Matt kissed her forehead. Every second and every hour was a struggle, a silent struggle against the unavoidable. One reality persisted in the silence, the stillness, and the unsaid fear. Their love was the only thing that had remained constant and the only thing that shone through the growing darkness. However, despite its fierceness and unwavering nature, love was powerless to stop the storm from intensifying. The only sound in the hospital room was the gentle beep of monitors. Jasmine sat next to Matilda, her eyes inflamed from so many tears and restless nights, her face pallid. On the other side, Matt knelt down and held her small hand, feeling the waning pulse beneath his fingertips. Every second felt like an eternity as time slowed to a ruthless crawl. Matilda was almost exhausted and her breathing were shallow. The same innocent warmth that had once permeated their home was now diminished by illness as she gazed at her parents with a wan, frail smile. Holding her close, Jasmine spoke quietly, her lips grazing Matilda's hair. "Don't worry, sweetie. Daddy and Mommy are present." Matt's voice broke as he repeated her words. "We love you so much." His tears fell quietly over Matilda's small hands. There was an almost hallowed silence in those last moments. The room contained their love, their sorrow, and their unsaid vows that her memory would endure forever, even if life could not be prolonged. Jasmine wished the world would stop and allow her daughter to stay a little while longer, because she felt every heartbeat and every tiny movement. Matilda's chest then rose and fell one final time as the room was enveloped in the still shadows of the night. She let out a quiet little sigh. The screens went quiet. Time halted in the hospital room as the outside world went on, unknowing. Matilda had left. With their anguish too great to express, Jasmine and Matt held on to one another. Tears streamed freely, mixing together, a flood of heartache and love with nowhere to go. As they cradled their daughter's tiny corpse close to them, they recalled all of the stories, laughs, and moments that had made her brief life so incredibly lovely. The next few days were calm and gloomy. There were now echoes of Matilda's disappearance throughout the house that had once been a place of laughter. The weight of her memories was present in every image, toy, and nook. However, Jasmine and Matt discovered a delicate fortitude in their sorrow. Their lifeline was their love for Matilda and for one another. They pledged to respect her, to live in a way that uplifted her soul, and to keep her light shining brightly in the world forever. There was love even in the most profound grief. Memory existed even in the silent pain of loss. And Jasmine and Matt continued the greatest gift Matilda had given them. The evidence that love, once completely lived, never dies, even in a world that felt unimaginably cruel. Ultimately, Matilda's short, brilliant, and lovely life served as a tribute to bravery, optimism, and the strong ties of family. Even though she had been carried away by the storm, the love that remained was stronger than sorrow and would never go out.